Welcome to Tombstone Tuesdays, everyone. This is a brand new live streaming show about historic cemeteries and the people who love them. I am your host, Tui Snyder, and some of you know me, but if you don't know me, I write books, I give talks, and I do a lot of research. And I really love sharing what I learned right here, well, in my books, of course, in my talks, but right here on YouTube as well. I'm so excited to do this show because I guess I should fess up. A big reason for me doing this is because it gives me a great excuse to talk to some of the fellow authors, his cemetery historians, and just cemetery enthusiasts that I've come to meet or that I want to meet. So it gives me an excuse to interview them, and I have a lot of wonderful guests lined up for us in the future. Authors and historians and many more. So stay tuned. As you can tell by the name, Tombstone Tuesdays. This is a weekly show. It happens on Tuesdays. And I did that, to help myself remember when it was going to be, but also to make it easy to remember. Oh yeah, Tombstone Tuesdays, if you want to tune into the live show. Of course, you can always catch the replay right here on YouTube and on Facebook too. And speaking of, I want to say, whether you were watching live right now or whether you're catching the replay, I want to thank you. And I want to ask you to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel and leave a comment and let me know where you are watching from. I'm so curious. It's really interesting. And if you feel like it, tell me, do you have some cool historic cemeteries near you? I have been doing a lot of vicarious travel lately, and that's one way that I can really enjoy that. So I am all set. I've got my blueberry rooibos tea and my historic cemeteries are my happy place mug, because I'm sure some of you can relate to that as well. However, before I go any further, I really need to say thank you to my Patreon supporters and my wonderful Patreon supporters. So I need to say thank you to Anne, Bob, Connie, NV, Julie, Margaret, Hugh, Mikhail, Naomi, Scott. Scott's a newbie. Hey, Scott. Ghost Cat. He's been following me forever. Yay, Ghost Cat. Ian, Jessica, Peter, Sarah, another new follower. Thank you, Sarah. Rachel, and I even have someone named Tui who supports me on Patreon, and we are not related, and I just get such a kick out of that. But I am so grateful to all of my Patreon supporters. I love you guys. And I've got to say, one thing I do for Patreons at a certain level is I send them postcards, but these aren't postcards that I buy. I actually make these postcards. So here's one from when I visited, it's a little confusing looking in here, when I visited the sponge diving town of Tarpon Springs, and I went and saw the graves of sponge divers. Sometimes I just do a pretty photo and I put like a quote on it and say something. And what's kind of cool, I then have to talk to you. It's really neat. I even have a map on there of where I took the photo, and I get to be the postage stamp, which, that's pretty cool. I thought you could only do that when you're dead, but not if you use TouchNote, which is an amazing service. So once again, I just had to thank you guys. Thanks to my Patreon supporters, that's why I was able to get a subscription to StreamYard, which is how I'm streaming this rather than doing the free option. So thank you guys for supporting my wacky creative endeavors. It means a lot to me. Now, next up, let's see here. Getting those controls. I wanted to share some photos of the week. One of the things that I really love about writing books is that readers send me really cool cemetery photos. And as I said, I've been doing a lot of vicarious travel, and all these photos is a great, fun way for me to get to do that. And this week's photos come from someone who is on my newsletter. She subscribes to my newsletter, and if you want to do that, I invite you to drop by my website, tuisnyder.com, because I send one out every Sunday. And that is, to tell you the truth, that is the best way to get a hold of me. because I neglect everything else, but I always look at my email and especially my newsletter every Sunday. I do look at that. So if you're really trying to get a hold of me, that's the way to go. Subscribe to my newsletter. Well, Tammy Love sent me some photos that she took when she was in New Orleans. And of course, if you like cemeteries, you know that New Orleans is a wonderful, it's like a playground for anyone who loves historic cemeteries. So here are a few of her photos. I really like this beautiful wrought iron gate and the perspective she has on it. Here's another one she has, and she's inspiring me to do a little more black and white. I take tons of cemetery photos, but I don't often play with black and white, and it does really work well. Of course, everyone loves looking at the angels and statuary. Sadly, this poor angel, you can see part of the wing has been broken off, but in its left hand, the angel is holding an upside down torch to symbolize that the life, it's still burning, so it's upside down to symbolize death, but that symbolizes eternal life because it's still burning. Here we have another beautiful, I love that blue sky. I bet it was hot as blazes that day. Here we have a faith, the virtue of faith. And this one is a fairly typical ornate Victorian era tombstone. We've got the lamb and a weeping willow. And I just wanted to share something that Tammy wrote in her email. She said that, quote, "I've always been fascinated with cemeteries, the history, untold stories, statues, etc. For as long as I can remember, I've played this game. When we check out a new one, we walk with our eyes closed, somebody holding your arm, until you feel like stopping. Inevitably, there is almost always something relative on that headstone, birthday, name, etc. If you really trust the process, it works every time." I thought that was really kind of cool. I used to play around in cemeteries more when I was a kid. Now when I'm there, I guess I'm a little, I'm very focused on things that I've learned. So I liked her cemetery game. And I just wonder if any of you have ever tried something similar or had interesting synchronicities occur when you were visiting a historic cemetery. Here's another one that she sent. It's just the Society for the Relief of Destitute Orphan Boys. Just a great example of how provoking it is to see these things. There's stories behind them. You really wonder what they are when you visit a historic cemetery. And then this last photo that she shared, it really, admittedly, I have to admit, made me jealous. Because as many times as I have been to New Orleans and explored the cemeteries there, I have never gotten to see the tomb for Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo queen. Something always happens the day we're going to go there. The moment we're going to go there, there's some sort of weather event or just something unexpected. So I've just got to say, I'm a little bit jealous. So I want to say thank you to Tammy Love for sharing those photos with me. If you want your photos featured on a Tombstone Tuesday, I'd love to do it. I have a few people lined up already, but I can always use more. And just go to my website, as it says down there on the scrolling thing, tuisnyder.com, and sign up for my newsletter if you're not already on it, and then hit reply and tell me about the photos you want to share. Okay, it's time for me to bring on this week's special guest. I'm going to introduce her. Now, some of you will already know Teal Gray, but for those who don't, I'm just going to give you a little brief introduction. Teal Gray is a sacred site traveler, an artist. She's also the author of several books, so check her out on Amazon, folks. But she is also an ordained non-denominational minister. I got to tell you, it does not end there. She does so many different things. I'm just going to tell you a few of them. She is an award-winning quilter. She makes amazing quilts. She does custom sewing, historical costumes, really amazing seamstress. She bakes these incredible cakes, custom cakes. She even grows her own lavender and sage and has a line of bath and beauty products. And to top it off, she is also a dear friend of mine. So I'm very lucky, and that's why I wanted her to be the first guest. I thought, who could be more perfect than Teal for today's show? So today, Teal will be talking about an ancestor of hers who just so happens to be a famous headstone carver. So without further ado, let me click here, see if I can bring Teal. Hey, it worked. Bring you
Hi.
into the show. Hi, Teal. How are you?
Hello. Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a little
Great to be.
chilly here in North Texas, isn't
It
it?
is. It is. We had snow on Sunday, I think. So
No, wasn't that pretty? It was
it's
fun
crazy.
to look at.
Hmm.
Now, before we dive into the interview, I have to give you a special, just personal thank you because I was thinking today that I would not be doing this show right now if you, what, 6 or 7 years ago, however many years ago it was, if you
Yeah.
had not invited me to be your co-host on one of your podcasts way back then. And I was so scared to do it, but I did it. And I've learned a lot. I've learned that I talk really fast and I need to slow down. And I've, but you've really gave me the confidence. I would not be doing this today. I would not even have a YouTube channel if it weren't for all your kind encouragement. So
Aw.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much. I knew. I saw the gift in you, and you just needed a little encouragement, and so I'm thrilled to have been part of that because I love your shows. I love your books, and of course our friendship is wonderful. But I'm really proud of you, and I have to just shout out a little bit also. Besides all your books and everything else, you're also a really gifted musician, and not everybody knows that. So I
Oh,
think I want people to know that you're really wonderful.
thank you. I do love playing music, and I did have the honor of playing piano at your daughter's wedding, which was a lot of fun. I was scared to do it, but you were like, "Come on!" I'm like, "Oh!"
Oh,
So I
it
did
was
it.
so, you looked so glorious there. That was this great cathedral wedding in this, beautiful setting and windows, several stories high. And Tui was the centerpiece there with this big grand piano playing. And
Oh, that
it
was
was
a
amazing.
nice
It sounded
piano. I wanted that
so
piano.
beautiful. I know we could have like taken it out the back or something.
Hmm.
You won't notice, right?
No, I won't notice. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
okay. Now, since this is Tombstone Tuesdays, I do have to ask, how did you become interested in cemeteries? Did you live near a graveyard as a kid or what?
Well, no, but I tell you, we were always very family oriented. Our family vacations were to go see more family. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
it,
Hmm.
now, myself and my kids, we travel all over the world and do things, but most of the family is now deceased. So we have different kind of trips. But in my time as a kid, everybody, you went to the grandparents' place or whatever.
That's true.
And so everybody was very respectful and conscious of, I guess, life and the ongoing relationships. They always had this conversation going about everybody that was deceased as if they were almost still there. They were always kept their memory alive. And so when we would go visit, I was always taught from the time I was a toddler on, to help clean the graves, help make sure everything was maintained, make sure you are respectful, careful where you walk, for several reasons. Careful where you walk because you want to be respectful, not walk across somebody's grave, but also for safety, because some of these graves in different parts of the country, some were in places that would, the weather, depending on the weather, they could really sink. And
Yep.
some, because they're so dry in parts of the area, same problem, they'll sink. And you might have this visual that, oh, the grass is all even, but when you step on something, you can go, down to your knee or farther. So, and also tombstones can fall on you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was always, kind of just grew up knowing how to navigate those. But they, I think it was just, I was always in one from the time I was carried around as a baby. I was just, it was normal. It was very, I suppose we had a bit of a Victorian upbringing in the sense that it was quite normal to be in the cemetery on a
Mhm.
holiday or anything else, and then go home and have a celebration. And, you visited everybody, and then they would talk about their life and all the interactions and the funny stories or the crazy things that happened. And so, yeah, it's just always part of it in that way.
So it's just part of you. Now,
Yeah.
you've been doing genealogy for a
Yeah.
long time, and this is something
Yeah.
I've just barely dipped my toes in. And I'm just so curious, how did you get into genealogy? Like, was this a natural extension? Were your parents already into it, or were you the first one to really do that digging?
There was always one person sort of in a generation, it seemed,
Yeah.
that was the keeper of all the family history and secrets. And I don't know why there were much older people than me in the generation. My brothers were 8, 10, and 12 years older than me. There were other cousins, females, and different things, but it was me. And they chose me and started really, telling me the stories and putting the pressure on, even at 5.
Wow.
Like,
That's early.
It was really early. And, don't forget this. Nobody else knows this, or this is a secret that we can't tell anybody because people are still living. It involves this and this. But,
Wow.
So I would go, I would be a little kid, and you walk into the rooms, or, you have the celebrations. And of course, everybody's secret. You know everything about everybody that other people in the room don't know. And so I just learned early on to kind of, keep a grin on your face and keep your mouth shut and just watch it go. But it was an interesting upbringing. And I think that was maybe part of what made me want to write, is because I got used to making, when I could write, making little notes and, little things to myself. And I've found so many of those through the years, and they're on the weirdest things. It's like I would tear, we used to get groceries in paper bags. And so a lot of my notes are on like pieces of a paper bag that I tore off and, in pencil, and you can barely read some of them, but it would be notes about the family or some secret, don't forget this. And some of them were pretty sensational. And so we're going to forget it. But yeah, so, and I think that now in my life, I need to write those down and put those, out for the whole, because there's just decades of people that are gone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if I don't tell or put those stories down, nobody's going to know, because nobody else knows.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, now one thing that you and I have in common is that we both do a lot of research, but I'm always impressed by, you do lots of genealogical research, as we mentioned earlier, but you always find such interesting things in your family tree. I mean, that's why we're having this show. And but a few years ago, we had such an interesting synchronicity. I think it was like 2016 or something.
Yeah.
And I was reading this book. See if I can get the glare off it. It's a really good book. It's called Our History in Stone, and it's by Cristina Enriquez. And it's so interesting. It's about a whole, like, tombstones in early colonial tombstones. So tombstones in New England, the ones that we don't have down here in Texas. Well, Teal and I are living in Texas. So it was really fun to read and fascinating. And so I had put the book down, was doing something else. You call me up and you're like, hey, Tui, I just found out that I'm related to Obadiah Wheeler, a well-known headstone carver in New England. I'm like, what? I actually know that name. Yeah, he is. And I've got the page where they talk about him and everything. It was just so funny. So how exactly are you related to Obadiah, which I love that name?
And, I know, that's a good name.
Great. And how did you make that discovery? How did you come across that?
I have several Obadiahs in the family line.
Yeah, it's a great name.
But that was so funny because you were like, I have him on my shelf.
I was just reading that. What is going
on? Really? Okay. All right. And I know he's quite famous. I mean, there's people who do their, doctoral dissertations and different things, his work and stuff. So there's, a lot about him out there. But he is my 9th great grandfather.
Wow. Okay.
And he came to me sort of accidentally. I do remember people, through the years mentioning his work, like, his stones. And I was so little when they were talking about that. I knew they were talking about tombstones, but it didn't really settle for me, to seek him out when I was older. It was just like, oh, okay. He was well respected and that sort of. But he sort of came to me in adulthood accidentally because his wife is my 9th great grandmother, and she is a descendant from the Mayflower, and I am descended from the whites that came over on the Mayflower, and she is.
Let me just interrupt you really quickly because my brother recently discovered that we had come over, have ancestors on the Mayflower. So I need to figure out, maybe we're related.
I'm sure we knew, we might be related. And I'm sure we knew each other.
Yeah.
She was Elizabeth White. And
Elizabeth
so
White.
she, of course, was related down the same
Mhm.
line. And so what was interesting is in my collection, I have Memento Mori pieces, and I was researching this piece actually, because that is a piece from a descendant of the Mayflower, and inside the locket is a beautiful, and let me just say while I'm talking about this, when you look at what looks like coiled that's hair. That is how fine of work they could do back in the day. That
Wow.
is hair that is braided, and it's 3-dimensional. And so it's braided in its own dimensions in each cord. And then those cords are braided together. And then the clasp and the, everything is in gold, and it's very ornate and very highly, carved and decorated. And then inside, of course, there is a brooch and a picture. And I didn't send that. I should have, sorry. But so in looking at that piece, I realized, oh gosh, so we were all related, and they came over, and that's when I discovered her. And then the reminder of, oh my gosh, Obadiah Wheeler. Okay, well, he's the famous stonemason. And so that was, where that came together in adulthood. And, also coincidentally, besides her, I'm related to the owner and builder of the Mayflower on one side of the family. And then, of course, the white line on this other side of the family. So it's kind of interesting. In fact, the owner and builder never was on the Mayflower. He just owned it and built it. He was very wealthy. And but so there's a lot of ship captains and different things. But yeah, so actually the wife was what I was researching, and then he came to life through that.
Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, I interviewed you earlier this year, and since you mentioned Memento Mori, I want to bring this up, and that whole interview was focused on your Memento Mori collection. So I just can't let you go today without touching on that a little bit, and I just wondered if you could, there is a whole video on here on my channel if people want to dig into that more, but if you could just, for some of the people who might not be too familiar with that idea, like tell us what Memento Mori is, the jewelry, and just talk briefly about your collection, and then we'll move on to wonderful Obadiah.
Yeah, Memento Mori is, something that is to remind you, remember you must die. But in my mind, and so much of the collection has brought to life for me, it's also remember you must live, because so many of us go through and we don't respect the time we have, and we don't really realize that it's very finite. You don't know how much time you come in with. And so there's people, of course, die super young. You live to be very old. Of course you want to live. I want to live to be over 100 desperately. But really, if you think about it, people go through the day. They don't even, as they say, stop to smell the roses, but they go through because they get this pressure of time. And I understand that, we live in a fast-paced world. We have to do so many things. But you do need to stop and remember to live, because you certainly will die. And Memento Mori pieces are, there's jewelry, there is subgenres, which is some of the subgenres of art are the pieces that I collect, where you'll see a dancing skeleton, and you will see different groups of people, all the way from children to the elderly, from the wealthy to people who are poor, and they're all together with this dancing skeleton, and he's leading them all, because the truth is, no matter what station in life you're living in, death comes to everybody equally, and you come in the world with nothing and you go out with nothing. No matter what you've accumulated, you can't take it with you. And so that was something, through the years that people would collect, and it was very commonplace, in the 1700s, 1800s, Victorian times, people would have the artwork on their walls. Some would have a skull on their desk. You would have timepieces that would remind you that, hey, time's ticking, it's counting down, you're going to die. So make this day. it was, people really had a little bit of a little thing in the back of their mind. And I've always said that sometimes when something is such a interwoven fabric of life that you're living in, which that was, it becomes almost part of the background, because you're so used to this like Memento Mori situation going on through the years, that it was a little subconscious thing to them that, hey, let's remember, we're to live the best life now and be the best person you can be, get your work done, because you don't know how long you're going to have to accomplish that. And I like that in a way. And I think now, unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've lost so many people in mass, and in such a way that we've never had this happen in our lifetime. But it's made people stop and think and reorganize their life, not just because they had to work at home, but working at home has brought families together and people together in ways that they hadn't in many years, because they couldn't. Just that fast pace, let's go. And so I think it took a little bit of getting used to for a lot of people. I think they've been struggling at times, but in a way it has rebirthed this connectiveness of family and friends, and people want to make those moments together, make those memories. And, they entertain themselves very much like they did in the old days. You see now so many videos and TikTok videos and different things where people are coming together and, hey,
board games, people are playing board games more. You would think we got all this high tech and people are like, I love it.
Yeah. And so you get this connectedness that I grew up with, but most people didn't, and that really wasn't there in these recent years. And so I think that it's kind of piqued people's interest in the Memento Mori. So it's not quite as creepy to some people.
Yeah.
I collect dead people's hair. And
well, you put it that way, it sounds
and
creepy,
their lives, because if you technically that's what I do. And I was reluctant at first. I mean, years ago, I would meet people and they did this and I thought, oh, that's not for me, because also I'm intuitive, and I thought, I have enough trouble with spirits. I don't need dead people with actual DNA in my house, and so I was not for it. And there's still pieces that I pass on. There's pieces that I feel like, I don't think so. And I'll leave those, but I have over 100 different pieces of either hair or jewelry, artwork, rubbing, grave rubbings or whatever in the collection. Of course, now that I'm way past caring, I collect, and I just keep collecting, and I don't know where it probably will never stop,
Wow. Well, now I have heard Obadiah Wheeler described as one of the most famous early stone carvers in colonial America.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us, what is it that makes his carving so special, and why is he so well known? I also would like to know, was he well known during his lifetime?
Yeah.
And was this his day job? Just tell us all this. I'm so curious.
Like everybody, it's almost any male in that generation, at that time, you could put farmer, because they are going to have land. If they had any sort of possibility of wealth or ownership, they would have land in the home and run that sort of thing. So he had the typical land, farm, animals, different things like that. He grew up taking care of things, but he was always a carver, and he worked with stone, and the heart of him as this artisan. And it was not something very practical times back then for Puritans. They wanted things orderly and tidy, and that didn't leave a lot of flora and fauna on the tombstones.
Yeah.
He wanted to bring, from what I understand, he had this artisan heart, so he wanted to really celebrate. He was a big respecter of life, and he took his work really seriously. He would spend hours greater than he was paid for to make sure everything was done well, and that it was beautiful, that it celebrated their life. And as much as he could, he sort of bucked against the system, if you will, and and decided, there could be so much more to this. And instead of just the flat stones, he, came out with these, like what would be like a 3D relief, if you will.
Yeah, I noticed there's sort of a
And so
bas relief aspect to some of the ones we've seen.
yeah, he
We'll
would
show
the
some
face,
photos in a minute.
and he would, put the face there, and he didn't believe, as I understand it, of course, everybody's got their own opinions, but from family stories and different things, he really believed in an afterlife. And so while yes, it's over for this life, he wanted to celebrate. People. Yeah, you could see those are more charming, maybe more endearing, lighthearted, versus the skull and crossbone Memento Mori that you usually see. He wanted to bring that, and was famous for creating this 3D facial relief on the stones. And he would bring the hair, the rays of light would be, some people, oh, that's hair. Well, it could be hair, it could be rays of light. It's whatever you want it to be. But he, to him, it was both. Certainly, the essence of the person was still flowing. That was sort of his ideas. And he loved to put in unique points. He was very, some people might say, oh, was he OCD? He might have been, because he liked things orderly. He liked a certain number of rosettas. He liked a certain number of this or that. And so consequently, before he was, famous, he took a fame on, I think, pretty early, just because this was so shocking and so different. So he was famous in his own time.
Oh, he was. Okay, so he was famous in his own time, and so people would have known of him.
He was.
What else? What religion he was?
Yeah, there's. The thing is, he crossed those lines on that too, in the sense that he was a believer and mixed. A lot of times people will have a certain religion and be Quakers and be different people like this, or Baptist or whatever. And he just was such a believer in people, I think. And so while his stones were sought after immediately, it would have been like any artisan that's doing any kind of work and they're doing something so different than what's been done before. They go, got to have him do it. And so he was always working. So
could only wealthy people probably afford his stones?
Well, that's the thing that was different about him. Yes. These would have been wealthy people, or people who just put everything they possibly had together to get him to do it. Yeah. And there was, himself and several others that were really sought after in the time. But of course, anytime that's a thing, it's expensive. But he did a lot of things that were charitable, and I don't think a lot of people realize that about him, that if somebody couldn't afford something, or they came to him with a story or something, and he was well set financially, so he could and did do some things for people that couldn't afford him.
Wow. Yeah. Well, now let's see here. So,
and he had, I want to say there's so many stones of his. So his early stones, his stones kind of evolved, and they had curls of beside the face. His later ones had different styles of wings. That was one thing that was very different for him. He would do almost avant-garde type wings, what would for the time.
Kind of like that one in the right. I'm kind of circling it with the cursor. That was a little more like bat wings. Yeah.
Exactly. And he just was an artist. And so it was going to be different. And that was just usually, there were just almost like templates for the other stones, that people were doing. It's like just very cut and dried.
So and elements of creativity would come
very through. Creative with his stones, and he's got a lot of examples of them, and so many places that his work is there, but it's mostly in, of course it's up there in Connecticut and all of the areas around there, the different places.
So he's in Connecticut. Now, speaking of Connecticut and Rhode Island and all those little states clustered up there, one of Obadiah Wheeler's headstones was recently involved in a very strange mystery that was partially
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could tell us about it. I'll show some of the photos here when we talk about
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
So,
that was, and I want to look at their names so I don't get that wrong. But this was found, in growing into these two trees. That, as you can see, where they've
mhm,
cut some of the tree away, they were trying to save it, trying to loose it from the two trees. But
mhm.
it came down to it that they weren't going to be able to save it and also save the trees. So they've left it there for now.
Look a little
But
closer.
it was actually 25 miles away from the original
Yeah, I'll show you
spot.
here. I did take a little Google Map thing. So this is
Yeah,
a young couple. They're both 29 years old. They bought a fixer-upper historic home in Rhode Island. And as they're cutting down the dead side of these two trees that have come together, they find, hey, whoa, uh-oh, did we are we on a cemetery? Which is, the way all horror movies start. Like, but
right.
and so here is the couple live in Hopkinton in Rhode Island,
Yeah.
but yeah, you were saying the stone originated all the way in over there. I had to go and see. I was like, how far away is this? As I was
No,
reading
it's
that
pretty
article, you
far,
sent
and
me
you
a.
have to think like in that day, that's
Mhm,
very far, And so here's the thing though, old carved stone pieces were popular in gardens, and the
mhm.
practice of people maybe even taking a footstone or a headstone or something
Yeah,
and
and this was a
home in their
footstone.
garden,
Mhm.
that would happen, that would happen. But here's the thing about his fame, he was so known for his certain work and
Mhm.
his certain images and the way he carved. That's how they knew that was his stone.
Yeah,
um,
I guess that little daisy
yeah,
wheel that we've
he
got in the
was known
center is a
for all these
real
things,
Obadiah.
and that was not normal. I mean, his stones were very different. They were beautiful, beautiful,
Yeah,
well loved. But so this was
this is the
something.
parent stone that he
Yes,
also
the
did.
parent stones, and that's what I was going to say. Um,
They almost look Aztec, It's like
yeah,
it's really
it's
incredible,
it's
very
really
different.
unusual, and
It
the way
is.
it's writing. So this was, Abigail Carew, the mother of Diadema and Lucretia,
Yeah,
sorry,
Lucretia, yeah.
um, which meant the girls were probably, related to the town founder of
Oh,
this, and so
here's
that
their
may be
headstone, the little
why
girl's headstone.
the little girls' headstones, and they, his. So that was just one of those things that knowing his work made it very different. And easier for them to find out who that was and put the
Yeah.
mystery of this tombstone, because people couldn't understand, like, well, where happened to this, and how did these little girls, what happened to them? They died of diphtheria, and in fact the parents lost all six children very close together.
Mm,
And so it was just it's still a little bit of a mystery of why that stone was
yeah.
moved and taken
And
away.
this is something that always affects me when I go to historic cemeteries. Is it really brings home. Earlier you mentioned that we don't think about Memento Mori so
Mm-hmm.
much, and part of the
Right.
reason is we are much more long lived. We don't lose our children before the age of 5 so quickly, and this to have tetanus, diphtheria, that whole Tdap shot. I just had mine
Yeah.
like last year or something, and I
Yeah.
just take it for granted. I've done historic research. I've read about how horrible it was, especially tetanus, to die from a
Oh,
horrendous,
yeah.
painful death. So
Terrible.
like it's just heartbreaking to see, and you think of these families just wiped out
Yeah.
by something that we prevent today with just a little jab. So it's like it's very sobering.
Yeah. Take that,
Hmm.
and, speaking of Memento Mori, he would put Memento Mori on the stones, and his stones also, are different in the sense that he would put a lot of information on them, or a poem or something, where a lot of the stones are just like you see today. It's very name,
Hmm.
date, dash, date, sometimes beloved, blah, 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 but that's
Oh
it.
yeah, here we go.
And so on some, there's Memento Mori, and one, of the Reverend Ebenezer Wayman was "Here Lies the Remains of the Reverend Ebenezer Wayman, the first pastor of the Church of Christ in Union, who departed this life on January 29th AD, 1745-6. And he was 38 years old, and lo, the sacred dust of Wayman, or Wyman, depending on how you want to pronounce it, lies, who fell to death a glorious sacrifice. Humility and meekness were his robes. His patience seemed to equal holy Job's. His master's service was his chief delight, in which his strength he wasted day and night. Here lie interreth the remains. And so he was very poetic, when he would do these things. And so that was also something that was unique about him, because again, most people were just the dates, and they didn't do that. And the truth is, I don't think they honestly had the skill level to do that, because to do the chiseling of that many letters, and he didn't do them just like a chiseled, very rudimentary. They're
still legible all these years later, which is pretty incredible.
Low, and they're kind of flowery, and it goes around with this whole artwork, and so pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's not just block letters; it's ornate fonts as well.
Very ornate.
But one thing that really sets Obadiah apart, which I find super fascinating, and I wonder if you know why he did this, but maybe no one knows. Of course, how much can we know from someone from the 1700s? But it's just that his designs were quite different. His epitaphs were quite different, like you said. They were very ornate and lengthy, which was kind of rare for the day. We don't really get that so much until the Victorian era. But the way he refers to the head of the household, which was usually a white man, is quite different for the time period. And I'll bring up an example, because I thought this was really fascinating.
That is something, he was a first, right? I mean, he was the only one. And his contemporaries really didn't catch on to this, and which is a bit surprising, because usually, even like now, somebody does something great and everybody hops onto it and they're like, oh, this is a good idea. But again, he had this sort of boldness to his work. And if you look again at this, you see, the face, it's not in a 3D relief, but it's carved very differently, and it's got the wings, it's got all this, curves and lines, and his lines are very straight, and yet the curves are beautiful and flowing. And of course, as you said, the font is gorgeous. But he referred to and again, this is my personal belief. I think because he cared so much about life and the person who lived it, just like the bit of a Memento Mori I just read to you that he did on one of his, and it was not unique. He did that on somebody's grave, but it really, when you read that and you listen, how that man lived his life. It's poignant, you really know something about the person. I think he got more and more probably emboldened because he was well known, and people loved his work. And so, it's kind of like you have a bestseller and you're like, well, all right, I'm going to do that again. And you get a little bit, you can stretch your legs, you get a little bit of boldness to you there. And
but it was pretty cool, because as a researcher, and maybe this frustrates you too, sometimes, let's say there's John Smith, and then the wife is just Mrs. John Smith. On the headstone and in the newspapers, you never find out her first name. So suddenly she dies, and then he remarries, and there's another Mrs. John Smith, and you're like, well, who was that? Obadiah really made sure that he said, Jane Smith, wife of John Smith. Like, he gave more credence to the other people. Like, he didn't just say John Smith is it. So I thought that was really quite unusual.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean, he was a bit, like I said, he really respected women in that day.
Unusual for that day.
So he's a little bit of a feminist.
Shocking.
Because he thought, and he treated, I've always heard that he treated women with great respect, and irregardless of their place in society. He spoke to women and men that were serving him as gently and respectfully as he would, his buddies or, any of that. So he just had a respect for people, but he respected women, and a lot of men in the day
Well,
back
yeah,
then,
you were just
1700s, that didn't happen.
you were property
You were cattle.
essentially.
You were property. The cattle probably had a name more than, they'd probably list the cow's name,
Yeah,
the will, and the woman was just Mrs. number 2 or 3.
whoever. Yeah.
You didn't count, but he did respect, and I think that because he kind of was bold enough and could, who's going to tell this famous guy no? I mean, he can do what he wants to, and he just did it. So he would just, I can do what I want,
Yeah.
Let me do what I want then. And so his want was to make sure everybody was, given their
Given
due,
a voice, I guess.
had their voice. Yeah.
Now, I have to ask about this one. This one made me laugh when I saw it. If people at home are having trouble reading this,
Yeah.
it says, she was a prude, is what it looks like it says on the epitaph. Now, what is the story here?
Okay, so when you're an artist, there's a little bit of artistic license, and sometimes he would run out of space. So what he was actually saying, and you don't get it until you read the whole stone, is that she was a prudent wife, but he didn't want to sacrifice his design, and that's why I say no one's ever said that, and it's just my own opinion that maybe he was a little OCD because he had his spacing and his artistic stuff. He could have moved it over and said, okay, well, this and this is going to be there, but I'll just move this line here so I get prudent on there. But he wouldn't do that, and he did. He's got a few stones that are like,
kind of funny, and you're like, what on earth? It can
like they're a prude,
I know, I thought that was so funny.
It doesn't bode well, like if you're just getting the caption. But she was a prudent wife, but she was not going to interfere with his spacing, and so he has some funny stones.
I know that just is so quirky and funny. I mean, it's like, I will never complain about a typo again, because once it's in stone, boy, you and I have had some very funny autocorrect moments. But hello, it's in stone, people. She was a prude, and there isn't room, and
there's no room. And maybe I'm the typo queen. Because I'm always just getting the information out, and I'm more worried about getting the information out. Or you and I are so busy, we don't even worry about typos. I know there's typo police, or
I don't want them in my books, but in general chat.
Sure, in the books, that's one thing, but that's different. But just
but when we're chatting, we can mess up grammar. It's just
what I mean.
It's casual.
Yeah,
it's okay to be
so maybe on a tombstone, I think he shouldn't have been quite as big, but some of them are funny if you look. But he's got hundreds of stones, and different cemeteries have different ones, and 80 something stones here, 70 something stones here. He's got a lot of work, and then there's other ones. Of course, they're not concentrated; they're spread out, or he did certain work that's certainly not just right in this area.
So I wanted to ask. So I was reading in here my little book I was talking about earlier, where they mention all these different carvers, and well, for one thing, the way they describe it almost sounds like an alien, because I'm like, but they say that he was active from 1673 to 1749, which is 76 years. So that is a very long working life. Well, he probably didn't start till he was at least 15, I'm guessing. I mean, how old did this guy live?
His apprenticeship. He would have started his apprenticeship earlier. And so you start, and that was in the family. There were other carvers. So he would have been, probably like me trying to teach everybody to sew. I taught myself to sew, to embroider when I was 7. And so I was self-taught and just...
You remind me of Obadiah a lot, because you're very, very productive.
Well, that comes, I think, from that line of...
That Puritan work ethic, baby.
Huge work ethic. And every day, everybody's passed on now, so nobody asked me, but I almost feel like having, the generals back in the Roman times, they would have the Memento Mori. They would have somebody behind them, even after a battle, shouting in their ear, Memento Mori, remember you must die, to kind of keep the ego in check and keep them focused on, you did win a great battle, but what else are you going to do today? And that was really what I grew up with from the time I was little on. Every day, not every week, not every month, every day, you had to account for, what did you do today? That was the question. What did you do today? And that did not...
That was on top of schoolwork.
Oh no, it couldn't
Yeah.
include school because that's an obvious, and it better be A's. It
Oof.
when you're older, it couldn't include work because obviously you were at the top of your game.
Oh
So
boy.
what else did you do
No
that
pressure.
day to be productive, to be helpful to the world, to be helpful to animals or people, or what did you do? What did you do? And so you're
Wow.
always like, I planted this, I created that, I made that, I did this, I helped this person.
Well,
Or
I've seen it in action. So, but I have got to ask, do you
Mhm.
know how long did Obadiah live? Do you know where he's buried? And
Yeah.
did he engrave his own tombstone?
This again, there's some things that will be in the book that
Oh, okay.
are because there's some people who think that he did have some work on it, but it's possible, but I think not. I think that it was somebody else did it.
So you know where it is.
Yeah, it's up there. He's buried up. He
In
died
Lebanon.
and buried up there.
Oh,
And his
okay.
wife, and you could see the graves. I'm gonna take a road trip, which I was
I
going
call
to
shotgun.
earlier. Yeah, I know. And it, of course, interrupted with the pandemic. But
Yeah.
there's some things I need to go and see for myself, and I have some records and family records and things like that. But I want to just look at some things and kind of. There's a couple of little mysteries with him that I want to put together myself and see instead of just taking the oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, since you're mentioning it, I want to show people your book cover here that you're working on, and just
Yeah.
you're kind of segueing into that. So why don't you tell us about
Well,
this book? What all you
Yeah,
how you
it's going
decided
to
and
be,
everything.
I think people talk about his work and his art in his work, and I agree, it's astonishing. But I also think there's really not a lot written in, and some of it, of course, it's going to be largely interpretation, like something would be with somebody gone so
Yeah.
long.
Well, yeah.
But I really think that he was an early, person for everybody's rights and respecter of all persons, or regardless of sex or age or anything else, or
Which is so unusual. I was shocked when
he was I think he was kind of a revolutionary in his time.
Wow.
So it's going to be, more about the person, not just the work. Because there's just books and books. You could just go anywhere and pick up books about him.
Yeah, about his work. But I want to know more about the person the more you tell me about his work.
The person, because he was private. He was well respected, well liked, well loved. But he was always working. He was very busy. But, I just think that there's a lot to him for that time. It would be extraordinary even 100 years ago. But when he was living, it's beyond extraordinary to give a woman clout on a man's headstone. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
And
that's amazing to me. And as I said, it is frustrating as a researcher too, when women are just not even mentioned, as they're just even everything revolves around the patriarch, and so a lot about him, but it's really hard to get that other information. And just to think he was kind of a precursor of saying, like, Jane, wife of John. He gave people a name. He gave everyone in the family a name. Even
everybody
kids,
had a name.
It
because they did in life. And just like the bit of Memento Mori I read that was on the one tombstone, that's not exclusive. He did there's many that he did, but in the way that he wrote, he's poetic. He came up with these beautiful lines, but in those lines, as I said before, you really learn about the person, the man, who that was that's lying there, how their life was lived and their legacy right there. And so I want to do that. And it's going to be a bit of a trip. So pack a lot of clothes, but I'm going to go because he does have hundreds of stones and I know where they all are. And so I'm going to go and take pictures of each one. And I've already gotten permission from different places to do the rubbings.
Oh, how cool. I have never done rubbings, and I have wanted
you have to be quite careful, and there's certain ones,
so.
With special permission, and then there's some that I won't do, so it won't be all of them because but some of them I want to do the rubbings and take a lot of photos of all of them and have that in the book. And because there's certain times that of his work where his work evolved, and I think he got bolder, and I think that he, was like, let me try some stuff. You like that? Oh, well, here, okay, well then let me really stretch my legs. And again, with the putting women's names on their husbands' tombstones and other members of the family and all these things, I just think that I would like to have different eras of his work and have all that sort of establish this life timeline for him that is more than just, the paragraph that you always get about him. He's the most carver, he's the most well-respected, beautiful, but there's more. So the book is really going to be delving into the more.
I really get the sense that there's a lot more to him just from the things that you sent me in preparation for this show. And I was just like, wow, I didn't really expect there to be so much. And I'm excited that they're really going to flesh out this portrait of a very interesting historic figure. Now, we are approaching the top of the hour, so I want to ask you to please tell us, I know you're involved in tons of things, but what would you like to tell us? What can you share with us that you're doing? And make sure you let us know how to keep up with you. And I've been having in the show ticker down there, I've had been mentioning your links. But I will also add links into the YouTube description so people can click on them later. But tell us everything.
Thank you. There's a lot of Teal Gray out there, so you can find me in a lot of different ways. I own the Lavender Crow, and so some of the things that are going to be new are that I am taking designs that are my own original designs, and also designs from my collection of Memento Mori, and I'm creating fabric. And people can, I'm going to do work with the fabric, but then people will be able on Spoonflower to buy the fabric. The Mori fabric.
Spoonflower? Is that like Etsy?
It is. And so you'll be able to buy it through me and on my site, but you'll also be able to buy it in a retail situation, if you will. So all of that's in the works. Bigger things happening with the Lavender Crow and the product.
I love your Lavender Crow. I've been using it. It's been cold here lately, which is why I'm all bundled up, because I have the best lighting in the coldest room. But, but I've been enjoying your bath bombs lately. And and the thing is about your products is they're so pretty that I have a hard time using them. The packaging is gorgeous, and you have little feathers and everything's so like, I don't know, but I'm making myself use them. I'm like, just use it, buy another.
I have people that say, I'm going to buy more just because I don't want to touch the other.
Exactly.
And so that's a great compliment. But even the smudge sticks, they don't want to burn the smudge sticks because
I had that issue. It looks so darn pretty.
Flowers and mine, and they're evolved, and so I appreciate that. But I'm also going to be selling more.
I'm definitely buying Teal's book. Hi.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tires.
I appreciate you. I'm going to have more things of my tactile, kind of the fabrics and different things available, bags that I make, from totes all the way to like purses and bags, and a lot of baby lines. That are new, going to be introduced. And I'm bringing back something that I started doing in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was called Healing Heart Bears. And so I'm going to bring those back because they were super popular, and I honestly just got so busy with everything else I couldn't keep up with making them.
Somehow I can believe it. You've got so much going on. You're like a one-woman factory. You've got so much happening.
What did you do today? So, and the bears. So I'm going to be making them and making them like the traditional way, but also with some of the new fabrics. So some of them will be the more modern bears, and they're little healing heart bears. So the hearts are different colors for different types of healing. And the ones for adults have stones inside their heart for certain types of healing. The baby line, of course, everything's just embroidered or hand painted or something like that. There's nothing.
So they can chew on it. The first things. For sure.
In their mouth. So nothing like that. But for the adults line, there's going to be the old traditional stuff that's on there. Of course, more and more products. I'm going to be doing a lot of throws quilts. I do the huge quilts and the competition.
I know. Your quilts are amazing.
Thank you. But I'm also going to to do some, because people are always like, well, I would love to have one of your quilts, but you know, can you just do a smaller one or something?
Oh, that's a
And
thought.
so I'm going to do baby quilts and throws and things, so
Nice.
people
Lap
can kind of
quilts.
cuddle up with a quilt, but
Mhm.
not have to have, you know, a queen or king size quilt and the
Yeah.
price tag that goes with it, you know, so
And probably fits in the washer better too.
it's in their washer and their
Mhm.
budget, you know, so that's
Yeah.
okay. But you know, yeah. So, and the Memento Mori, when things open back up
Mhm.
from the pandemic, then I'll go back to taking that kind of on little tours in different places,
Mhm.
that I would show different pieces. And the one thing I did, people were always a little shocked that I did it, because some pieces are pretty valuable, but I would let people hold them or touch them, to feel that history and kind of get past the creep
Yeah.
picture of it, you know. And
You know, that's what I like about
good.
smaller museums that I
Yeah,
visit around the country. Like, you know, there's the big fancy museums and
yeah,
and everything's behind glass and you can only stand so close. But the smaller mom and pop, they're like, touch it, go ahead. You're not
yeah,
gonna if you make friends
yeah.
and
You're not
are
gonna
nice
hurt
to them. And it's
him.
just nice that
Yeah,
there's something to be said for you connecting that way. And I don't know what it is. We just sometimes
yeah.
are tactile. It's just part of
It is,
being
and
human.
then it just, the history comes alive for them. So they're hearing the
Mhm.
stories, and then they can touch that piece and think,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, some of these pieces are very, very old." You know, so
Mhm.
it's just I like that, and I love the curiosity that happens once, you know, they realize the artwork that's involved with it. It goes beyond just being something, a keepsake of a person, and it
Mhm.
becomes this art form that people never knew existed, and
And
how the
weaving the
hair,
hair, the individual hair.
oh,
I mean,
it's braided
that's
so
just
tiny, and then in 3D. I mean, the stuff that happened, you know,
yeah, that is
we
amazing.
think we're good artists now. We're not, compared to what they were.
Mhm.
They're just amazing. So, you know, that I like to bring forward. And so the Memento Mori will grow. The books are still all coming, and
Yeah.
you know, then more design work and all that. I just like to keep it all flowing.
Well, obviously, I'm going to have you back on to talk about more things as I've had you on
Love
before.
it.
And I'm just so grateful that you came on today. Thank you so much. And I'm grateful to everyone who watched today. And I need to tell people that next week I'm going to be having David M. Haben, a cemetery historian who travels a lot for work, which means he gets to see tons of historic cemeteries and he has some very intriguing tales to share with us. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can set a reminder for that. And just Teal, you're a wonderful guest. I'm so grateful to have had you today, especially on my
Thank you.
inaugural time, first time using
I'm
StreamYard. I
I'm
was a little nervous.
honored. I'm honored. Thank you for having me. It was great fun.
Thank you so much. So, everybody, if you want to stay in touch and know what's going to be happening, make sure you go by and sign up for my weekly newsletter. That's where I alert everyone, or support me on Patreon or something like that. Or just follow me here on YouTube so that you will know that next Tuesday you can join in the fun. Also, I want to say if you would like to be a guest, or there's someone that you think I should have as a guest, hey, I am excited. I would love, let me know. I've got some people coming, but if there's other YouTubers, I've got one YouTuber coming next month. But you know, all walks of life. You don't have to. I like anything to do with historic cemeteries and historic research. So just whatever you think would add to this whole conversation we're having. So thanks again, everybody, and I will be seeing you next Tuesday. Thank you. I'm going to end
Thanks.
broadcast.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.